Good. Has anybody heard from Zach? Are we waiting on him?
JT just got up and left the screen, but he's there.
Okay, well, I say we get started just so that we can get going on this. The earlier we get started, I guess the earlier we get done. If that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, that sounds great. I actually just commented, but I realized my thing was on mute, so no one heard me.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just get right into this then. So it says part 1, who is to hire. So imagine you guys are all bankers at Super Saturday, and vote on which 2 candidates you guys would like to hire. So what do you guys think? Who are the 2 candidates that you guys would pick?
I vote for the Mexican guy. The first one, like the one who started his own business with like the SAT stuff.
Is that the Andy Sanchez?
Yeah, Andy Sanchez.
Okay, perfect. And so you would, why would you hire him? Because he started his own business?
Well, like, cause like his grades were low, which like I could understand being like alarming, you know, for somebody who's looking for somebody who's going to be professional and be reliable. Because a lot of times, like even like it stated that USC had like high grade inflation, which like they always told me that like, oh yeah, schools know, you know, if you're like how hard classes are, and they actually study that. Like so when you apply for places, they know like, oh, if you have a 4.0 from such and such school, like it's artificially inflated. So they knew that, but I think even still, like, it would be easy to get higher grades as long as you put in the effort. But I think that he was busy doing his own business and he had other things. Like, so he does well in what he loves, and if he loves, you know, what SG Cohen does, then hey, I mean, maybe he just didn't like classes or lecture.
No, I think that's a good reason. There's a guy who I know very well, and he works in oil, but he did not graduate from high school. He ended up getting his GED later, but I live in Bakersfield, California, so it's all like oil and agriculture, and he actually, this particular guy, loves what he does, and he does very well in oil, but he doesn't have a college education, and barely has his GED, so I think that's a good example, JT. And does anybody else have somebody that they would hire?
I think the girl would be good. The only reason some of them were not liking her was they said she might be hard to understand in English, but she's fluent in Russian. I mean, there was like 4 other languages she was fluent in, which I think would be really good for all the clients. And it also said that, you know, maybe she'd be better because she'd talk a little bit slower since they all talk so fast anyways.
Yeah.
And she had a lot of experience.
No, and I like that in the actual document, it talks about how one of the interviewers, when he'd go out, he wanted somebody who showed ambition and determination, and were 2 of the terms that were used to describe her, was that she was ambitious and she was determined in what she was doing. So I think that's a good choice as well. So let's talk about the other 2 candidates. Martin Street, for example. So he's the one. He's a second-year Wharton MBA and previously served 4 years in the military. So why would you or would you not hire him?
Well, military people, military people are automatically required to work in groups. Race is not an issue because your uniform is your color. You are so focused on team that they are required to work as a team. If you're looking for a team player, a military person would be a good person to start with. That would be a good starting point.
No, I think that's a good
Um,
reason to hire.
Yeah, I think he's out of all four of them, he's more or less qualified as far as I think the experiences goes. He has not much finance background, and so I don't know. Out of for all four of them, I don't necessarily know if I would hire him from that perspective. Just because you want to have somebody who has that kind of background. Well, depending on the position, that this position looks like it kind of needed to have some of that, and so I don't know if I would necessarily pick him first.
No, I agree with that. It talked about, like, if you go back and look at what it talked about for him, it doesn't necessarily say, it says he has little to no business experience, but he's a good leader, and he has good leadership skills, but, I mean, not very much business, so I agree with that. And then what about, I think the last one is Ken, so Ken Goldstein.
I think he was good. The only thing they didn't like was that he had so much experience that maybe he was too mature and wouldn't want to take directions from people. Plus, also, he had a family, and he said that they were, a priority also. So I don't think people liked that.
No, I don't think in this type of business there's not a room for a family, but I don't think that's what people look for necessarily. So what other information would you guys use in making your decision about these four candidates? So I think Ken is a good example. Like, he talked about his family.
I think with Martin, they said they had a really hard time scheduling him because he was at so many other firms, and they were worried that if he couldn't make the decision, that they would lose out on other top candidates.
Yeah, that's true.
In the text, it talked about culture, like being able to culturally adapt to living in New York City. Did you guys see a problem with any of these candidates and that being a problem?
Not really. I didn't see anything that said that wouldn't want to move or restrict where they're, going to, or that. I didn't read anything in that about moving or being in that location. Where does it say anything about being in New York?
Just earlier in the text, it talks about how as an interviewer, you kind of want to get like a cultural, like, do they culturally fit into the lifestyle of living there? Yeah.
Okay.
So what else would you guys want to know about the type of person who can succeed at SG Cowan?
I think it's kind of important to know, like, what, well, it's hard for us to know, but what kind of, like, groups that they'll be in with, so you can kind of see, how that person would fit into wherever they're going to be placed in, just so they kind of know, like, obviously, if you're going to be hired in a department that's all dominant by certain races or certain type of people, then you have to consider, like, whoever you hires would be okay and survive in that environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that would be helpful to know, is where they're going to be placed in and what type of people they'll be working with.
No, thank you for that. So what else would you guys want to know about the candidates? Is there anything about these 4 candidates that you guys think would have been helpful to know in making the decision?
It might have been nice to learn a little bit more maybe about their family background. Andy talked about how he had to put himself and his brothers through school. You know, is he the sole provider for his family? You know, his siblings? I don't know. And I don't know if that would make a difference or not. That, you know, if they're making a, you know, something about kin having a family, you know, what about the rest of them? Are they married? Do they have kids?
No, I think that plays a part in what hiring people. I think that is very important. I think your family does kind of like personally, I don't work because I want to stay home with my children, so I do that, and that's the decision that I made. So I think other people make those same type of decisions. So I think that's a good point. Thank you. So we can go on to and I guess it also says how would you get that information. So do you feel like that's an appropriate type of information to ask somebody in an interview setting?
I think so. Just asking them, you know, to talk about themselves a little bit and what their background is. I don't know. Maybe that's not okay, but maybe if you don't ask too personal of questions, and hopefully they'll open up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with Suzanne. I would definitely want to know more of their personal background. I do know, like, 'cause for medical school, when you interview, they can't actually ask you about kids or ask you about marriage. I mean, they'll look on your hand and they'll try to get you to open up because they want to know, you know, are you going to be able to make it? Are you going to have these kids that are going to get in your way? But they can't sit there and go, well, do you have kids? Are you married? You know, what are your life plans? And obviously, it's different with the job than it would be with the school. But I mean, those are things that you want to know about someone because that's what makes them who they are. So there's nothing in specific that I would say that I want to know about these candidates as much as, like, I would have wanted to be in the room, like, interviewing them and, like, hearing how they answered. Like, was it real well rehearsed? Like, do you feel like they just sit in front of a thing? Are they just good interviewers, or are they actually, like, do they have something to back it up behind them? Because you could interview somebody and they'll interview great, and then you get them working, and in the first 2 months you realize they studied how to interview, and then they don't perform.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was interesting. I went to Brother Boney's the office hour and was listening, and he mentioned that from his standpoint, you know, he hires people, and so he was saying that he always want to know their background, and you know, he can't ask specific questions like you know, JT just said. You know, he can't ask them how many kids they have, or you know, if he's married or what, but he can always ask, you know, tell me about your background, or tell me about, you know, more about yourself. And then when, you know, you ask that kind of question, then it's up to the, you know, person to answer however they want to answer. And usually they can get most of the story, or, you know, like what's important to them, and, you know, what kind of background they're from, and all these things. And, you know, he said it's interesting to find out about their stories, and, you know, people who he looks for people who can, like, communicate well and tell the stories and kind of, you know, talk about experiences that they've had. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. It's a different, you know, perspective.
He also mentioned, I was going to say, on the employer side, the person doing the interview, have the person be genuine, be themselves, tell their own story. The interviewer, the person who is asking the questions, has to be a good listener to be able to hear their story and not just check off a mark and say, oh, I've asked this question. And he was very adamant saying meet them more than once. Okay, if you have to meet them on Mondays and then on a Friday, get a different perspective, a different day. Maybe they had a rough morning that day, and now they're going to have a good day, and they're going to present themselves in a different way. So I think a lot of times he was saying meet them more than once to get that perspective.
And that's helpful in the hiring process.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think we can move on to part 2. And it says, why is there so much disagreement between the senior bankers in the Saturday meeting about which recruits to hire?
I think because they're all very opinionated and probably have exactly an idea of what they want. And these 4 candidates, some of them have it, some of them don't. You know, they each have a little bit of all of it, but a little bit of not.
I think that's a good point. I was also, as I was reading, I thought it was interesting that it talked about how a lot of the recruits had backing from people who were actually on the interviewing board. So I think that could be a factor too. I think, like, if you were to think about somebody, if you were hiring someone, you would prefer to hire somebody that you know personally and that you can endorse than somebody that you don't know because you're taking a risk. And I think if it was somebody that these people, if it was like a friend's child and they were trying to help them out, I think that that's why you would definitely go with it. So I think that that was also something that played in like the disagreements between the senior bankers that day. Do you guys think that the interview process had anything to do with their disagreements that day?
I think that the senior bankers, the people who are looking, they have their own ideas or their own agenda. So one person is looking for this quality, this other interviewer is looking for this other quality. So you're going to have 4 different people looking for 4 different attributes of the hiree. And I think that's the problem, is instead of having one person saying this is what we're looking for, you have 4 different people saying, I'm looking for this and this and this.
Perfect. And do you think that the type of interview had something to do with it at all?
What do you mean by type of interview?
Like the way that the interview was set up.
I think maybe in a little bit, just for the fact that they said that they were interviewing, like, you know, interviewed with 5 different people. And I don't know, that could be getting a little tiring.
Absolutely.
Especially if they're all looking for different qualities. And, I mean, you can tell whether someone likes you or whether they think you're doing well. And so the first person you interview with, you can tell they don't like you, you're going to think, great. And it's going to maybe change the way you interview with the rest of the 4.
Jim?
Can anybody else hear that feedback? Okay, there we go. Okay, so might there be better ways to learn about the candidates than the traditional interviews? What else might they try? And then have applicants demonstrate the ability to do certain tasks on the job. So do you think that there are different ways that this could have been interviewed, and even outside of just this type of interview, like in a setting that you would personally be in? Is there better ways to learn about candidates?
My question is, how would you set this up so that they're sure doing the banking job? I mean, are you going to have them demonstrate what they can do? I'm asking, what do you want them to do?
How do I want the interviewers to set it up?
Yeah.
Well, that's what the question is do you guys think that that there are different ways than what was done in this particular setting, that there are better ways than how they used it to get to know candidates?
I think there are a lot of different ways you can do, interviews, even if it's same kind, like where they have a whole bunch of people and you just have one day of doing it. Interview is one thing, but another thing is like put them into groups or something and have them work some kind of situation or hands-on kind of, activities could get to know them better and how they solve the problem and how they work with other people. And so, I mean, interview is important, I think, but at the same time, it just depends on what they're looking for. If they're looking for a person, to see how they work or how they solve the problem and how they come up with, different ideas and solutions and things like that, then, there are other ways to do things as well.
No, I think that, and that goes into one of our next questions. One of the next questions is, how do bankers know what they're supposed to be looking for in a candidate, and how can this process be improved? So two things I was thinking as you were making that comment. Has everybody seen the internship? I don't know if that's inappropriate, but the internship with Will Ferrell or Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, and they go to Google and they're interns. But they break them up into like groups, and then they like have them do all these tasks, and that's kind of how they get their during their internship is a way that they know if they want to hire them or not, if they're actually going to make it with the company. So I think that goes along with what you were saying, like as part of their internship, they had to do certain things that put them in the real situation that would see if they were candidates for that position. So I think that's a really good example. Also in the document, it talked about how this company before they would open it up and they would do different interviews outside of the company or from the core schools, they would actually use the interns and then would promote them before this hiring season. And I thought that was good. And it went back to our conversation last week or a couple of weeks ago that you take the interns and you would kind of promote from within, and then that helped your business. So that was a really good point. Thank you. So the next part talks about school recruiting. So deciding which business schools to recruit at what was controversial. So why was the choice of which schools to recruit so important to SG Cowan?
Weren't they looking at alumni, people that, okay, they went to this school, so they looked only at these people from that specific school instead of other schools? I think that was the problem that they talked about, is they only were looking at one specific alumni.
Yeah, I think that they were definitely doing that. They were using the schools that they went to as like the feeder school. Also, I think that if you look at it, it talks about how they took from like USC and Cornell later, but NYU and stuff like that. I think a lot of, but they didn't necessarily look at schools that weren't those like the core schools that they would, or the schools that they were considered core. Do you guys think it had anything to do with? Do you think that was a good strategy? And do you guys think they chose from like the core schools because they were the core schools that had like the big name stamped and attached to them?
I think in some ways though, big like name schools do have a reputation and set standards that comes with when you hire people from those schools and programs. But at the same time, you kind of want to diversify, and so I think it's important that you do look at these schools that are high rated and things like that. But I think it's also important if you're looking for, diversity and to, hire somebody unique, then you might have to go somewhere different as well, just so you get a variety of people. Because I think, you know, if you just stick with certain one every year, then that's what you get, you know. But if you can, you know, do different type of school as well, then you might get variety of people and you might get better candidate. It doesn't guarantee you, you know, that you will find one somewhere else, but that would give you more options and, you know, more variety as far as candidate goes.
Yeah, so it definitely, choosing from the core schools definitely has its good and its bad.
Yeah, I like that they stepped away from like the top whatever business schools. Like they weren't at Sloan, they weren't at Harvard, they weren't at wherever it was. They stepped away and then they jumped down to like the top 25. And I thought that was like a brilliant idea. Not just because you can focus more on these, you know, because there's going to be great students that are at these top 25 schools, and for whatever reason, they may be better than, you know, the not as great students at Harvard or the not as great students at Sloan. But they also open themselves up to those those students that are at Harvard that are, you know, top students. They can actually come to SG. So if SG Cohen has like a good rep, I mean, they're going to be recruiting just by name, if that makes sense. So they're still going to get these recruits from Harvard, because Harvard student can go wherever they want, I mean, if they're top of their class. So in a way, that they're recruiting where they need to recruit, and then those that want to come to them will come to them, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. So do you guys think that it would make sense for this company to recruit from other graduate programs like law or technology?
I think they need to expand their repertoire. If you keep going to the same space or the same school, you're going to get the same clientele, the same person. If you want different ethnicity, different backgrounds, you're going to have to expand where you're looking at. Because if you keep going to the same place, you're going to get the same person.
I think that's a good point. And also, it talked about how they went from a deficit one year to making a profit the next year. And it talked about how I wish I knew where that was in the text, but it talked about how it would have to do with technology and health, which were things that they weren't normally dealing with, because they had people who had knowledge of those areas. So I do think that it's beneficial for them to go and hire people from different programs. So do you guys think that SG Cowan should change from the core school strategy now that it's employer market again? Could they probably go back to the top 10 schools and get top applicants now? I actually think that JT just answered that. Like, some of them you're gonna get better students. They don't have to be in those top 10 schools. You may get somebody from a top 25 that will do just as great, and if not better. So I think that we kind of already answered that one. So what are the pros and cons of this company approach to recruiting people on their campuses?
I think it's a pro to be able to do it, because when you're going to school, you're kind of wondering, you know, where do I want to work? And if they are at a job fair, you're introduced to them. I'm sure there's some people that know them, but if they're a smaller firm, they might not be quite as known. And getting out there and getting to talk to people, that way you'll actually get to know what the company's like a little bit.
So are the associates the best people to send to campuses for recruiting? What do you guys think about saving money and getting a more uniform by sending recruiters from the HR department? I kind of have an opinion about that, if I can say. I mean, I know I've been talking a lot, but I do think that you send out the people who know the most about it. Like, I think it gives you like a personal connection to them, and somebody in HR, they're just not that I don't want to say they're just the HR department, but if you're going to go into HR, you want to talk to somebody who's in HR. You don't want to talk to somebody who's like, you don't want to talk to the janitor. Does that make sense? Like, if you're going to talk to somebody, you want to talk to that person who that's the field that you're going into. So I think that sending out the associates is the best people to send out to the campuses.
I agree.
We do that at the hospital. We actually are in the interview process and and we tell them exactly, this is what we're doing as a job, these are good things, these are bad things, the tech knows what that's going to be required. And so, like you said, an HR person is good at HR, but an HR person has no idea how to take an x-ray, how to deal with a patient. What do you do? That is why you need a tech person to go out in the interview, because they know what the job is.
Yeah.
Well, I think they also know, what they do, so they know what to look for as well. I think, I don't know if you only want to send that person either, though, just because they might not know, like, how to really interview and how to find out more about that person that they're interviewing as well. So I think it's important to send the actual tech, but at the same time, I think there's got to be somebody else too that can really, interview and find out the important information as well.
So do you guys think, along the same note, that it would be beneficial to send out senior bankers?
No, I don't. I think it'd be a waste of their time. I think because they're not in the day-to-day stuff, it's going to be the lower people that are more doing the day-to-day stuff, and they know more of what I think type of people that are going to work better. I think when you're higher up, you kind of forget what it was like when you're starting out.
The higher-ups don't do the job. It's the people who do the job, they are the people that you should send out.
No, I agree. I think those are good points. I think, and I also think, like, if you were to think of accountants, CPAs are great, but as you get like higher up in the business, you don't do the grunt work so much. So you're not as, like you guys said, you're not in the mix as much as you were before. So I think that it is beneficial to send out people who are kind of have their hands dirty and getting into the work. So, what do you guys think of the self-selection process? What type of people will most likely self-select?
I think they're going to bias. I mean, it is a good thing to get candidates that are interested, but they are going to bias themselves towards a certain type of candidate. There may be candidates who are more involved in school and for whatever reason, can't make it. I mean, you could say they'll make the time if they really want to do it, but maybe they just don't have the funds at that time. Maybe there's somebody who's putting themselves through school. There's a great candidate that exists that, for some reason or another can't take a weekend off to fly up to New York or there's other circumstances. So you are going to weed out a couple of those people, and maybe those are the outliers, and it's a great process. But that's just my problem with it.
I agree. Like when my husband first graduated from college, companies flew him to different places to interview, but there was no way we could have afforded it. We had 2 small kids, and we're in college. So yeah, if they're not willing to help pay, fly them out, there's definitely gonna cancel out a lot of people.
All right. So there's 2 more parts. So Super Saturday and then the final wrap up. So what are the objectives of Super Saturday?
To find the 20 candidates that they want to offer the job to. That's their ultimate goal.
And then do you guys feel like any objectives conflict with one another?
I don't think they conflict.
I didn't necessarily feel like they conflicted either.
Okay.
So what type of information should SJ Cohn gain from candidates during this process?
Well, I think they're going to gain, they're going to learn about their background. They're going to learn about, schooling. I think one of the big things would be maybe also what they're interested in and where they see themselves in the company. They're going to just learn more. You know, there's one thing to see a resume. It's another thing to talk to someone and actually hear how they talk, how they act, and different things like that.
I hate to say it, a resume is a pretty paper. That is all a resume is a pretty paper. And to see that person and see if they are going to connect or interconnect with you, you don't know.
No, absolutely. Anybody could. I think that anybody can type up a resume. It's different when you actually meet that person. So do you guys think that there would be better ways to structure the on-campus interviewing and recruiting?
I wouldn't limit just the top echelon. I would make sure that if somebody comes to you and say, I want a job, get their information and find out, okay, are they qualified, can they do it? So not only looking for the top people, top grades, top everything, but look for a person that is wanting to go to work for you. That's a big thing.
I think that's great. And I think we kind of covered this one, but just I'll give everybody a chance to answer that. What do you guys think are the pros and cons to Super Saturday?
I think one of the pros is that you're meeting everybody on the same day. And so it's, you know, you're not thinking, oh, I know I met him last week, but I don't even remember what he looks like. You know, so that way they're meeting them all on the same day and they're discussing it as soon as, you know, on the same day. All the top people are getting together to talk about it. So that way everything's still fresh. The downside would be that, you know, maybe they're not interviewing good on that day. Maybe they would interview better on a different day. You know, maybe they were sick or maybe they just, you know, who knows.
I think a downside, kind of going along with what you said, is that you're interviewing everybody. So I think a good thing is that the people who are going to be leaders are going to kind of come forward, but people who may still have good skills and be assets to your business, if they're shy, they may not necessarily step forward, and you see that within them, if that makes sense. So what is the difference between recruiting and hiring?
Well, recruiting is where you let the people know about the positions and things like that, what's available, I think. And then hiring is actually interviewing and all that process to get them to your company.
So what did you guys learn about this case from recruiting? I think kind of going along with what we talked about is I think going to the campus has been awesome. Like I kept thinking the whole time we did this, like when I was physically at BYU Idaho, I often walked by those people who were there from like other places or like the Navy or the Army, but people who were interested in them would stop. So I do think that that is a good thing to like go out there and to physically be there and to show your face and to shake hands and talk to people. It's a good part of recruiting that they applied within this company. What did you guys learn about hiring people?
Everybody has lots of different opinions, and so I think it's hard when it's having, how many people did they have? 30 people of the managers that were all talking together, so it's kind of hard, I think, for everyone to agree on people, so I think that might be a little bit harder.
Do you think a smaller panel would have been better to just keep it as a smaller number in the hiring process?
I mean, not knowing for sure how many groups they were hiring for, but yeah, I think it would have been a little bit easier if you didn't have 30 people there.
So we're just at the last few questions. So on a, it says on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you guys rate this overall discussion today?
I think we all did really good talking and communicating. I would say maybe a 9.
I second that notion.
I think we did pretty good too.
Okay, perfect.
We all did good. We all contributed. We were all asking questions.
That's right. We all talked, right?
Yes, we did. Everybody contributed. Oh, it also says, as a leader, what are things that you guys liked, and what are things that I could do next time to better the discussion?
Cookies would have been nice.
Huh?
Cookies would have been nice.
I know. I should have thought about that ahead of time.
Oh, but then you can't share, so that would be no good, right? It would be a terrible thing.
I think you did a great job.
I think you were prepared. I felt like you knew what you were supposed to do beforehand, and I can tell that you prepared yourself really good too. So thank you.
No, thank you guys. So I think that means that we're done for tonight, and just kind of a reminder that we have all those assignments due. So like our not our midterm, but kind of our mid-course feedback, our self and peer assessment this week that are due. So.
And also the new doohickeys, we might want to start jumping onto that. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe same kind of thing. Do you guys like Google Doc?
Yes.
As far as it worked pretty well, I think. I don't know, Suzanne. How did it go? Did everybody end up doing what they were supposed to do, or how did it work?
I think so. It worked good on my side. I was kind of busy, so I know some people texted me or called, and I wasn't able to get back because I was in a conference all weekend. But
okay.
I was able to get everything done and submitted it. You know, it always kind of takes a while for him to grade stuff, so, you know.
I say we keep with the Google Doc format. It was easy to just like all work together and each contribute, so I think that worked well.
Yeah, I think it was pretty good. I think maybe, you know, like first week or two we have it up just like we did, and then maybe people can put in what they think, or, you know, the thoughts about it. Start putting whatever you feel like would be, you know, the problem and then the solution. And so if we can start doing that earlier, then we can assign right, you know, in the beginning. I don't know, what would you like? I mean,
I think for now we should just put the Google Doc up, and then maybe next week we make all the assignments, like after we've all had more time to individually look over the assignment.
Sounds good.
Okay, and then do you want to do that, or I can do that as well? So.
Do you want me to put the Google Doc?
Yeah, if you want to do that, and if you don't want to, like I said, I can do that as well. So.
Sure, I can try and figure that out. I haven't.
Have you done one before?
Stuff out, but no, I have not.
I can totally do it. That's no problem for me. Google Docs are easily. Apparently, Suzanne knows how to send out these invites really well, so I could do an invite to the Google Doc. This, however, I'd never figure out.
Oh, okay.
Was it okay, people adding to the doc? Did you have enough information from different people to submit the doc?
Yeah, I had over 3,000 words. You can go back and look at the document still, because I just copied and pasted it to the Word document and submitted it that way. But yeah, I had enough, I think, from everyone, and you know, it took me a while to edit and make sure the beginning, intro, and conclusion were good. So maybe next time. Well, normally I don't do stuff on Saturday, so Saturdays normally are fine. Personally, I like to have it done maybe a little earlier, but that's just because I have 5 kids and it gets crazy on the weekends.
I think that because Suzanne, I was the one who went in and helped you like edit it. I think that there was so much that we should definitely have 2 editors next time, so that you have 2 people looking at it and formatting it, and then of course one like designated to submit. But I think it would help if we had 2 editors because it's a lot.
Yeah, I think
it
that's
is.
a lot.
Yeah.
What if
So I
we
think-
had one do like introduction and another one do conclusion? That way they don't, you don't both have, like, you don't have to do both of them because that's a lot. It's a big thing.
Yeah.
And then, both can like edit. And that way, we have, I think it helps to have more editors. That way, you can kind of make it work better. You can catch the mistakes of other ones,
Yeah.
and make it work.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that for this next doohickeys problem.
Okay, and what do we shoot for like a little earlier time, maybe like 3 or 4 days before it's due? We have most of the stuff there, so there's plenty of time for editor to kind of work on it because I know that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that sounds good.
okay. So next one is like week 7 or something like that. Was that right? Let me go check.
And while you're checking, who's going to be the discussion leader next week?
I think Leonard already volunteered. He wanted to do it, but is that okay with you?
It's okay. I'm just warning you all. I am the techno challenge person of this group, but I'm willing to learn.
Okay.
I can go ahead and send out the invite and record it every week. That's not a big deal. I don't have a problem doing that.
Well, I tried to set it up, but apparently I set it up for the wrong day. So
Yeah, well, when you go to do it, you would and you put now, you would think it would go for now, but it goes
Now,
for
today,
the next
right.
day. Yeah, it's really
okay.
confusing. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Suzanne, I say you keep rocking and rolling with that because you're pretty good at it. So,
Yeah.
To be honest, this is the first time I've ever done it.
well, I'm impressed
Are
because
you
I've done this
doing
for a long
great?
time. Yeah. All right, then. I think that we're good as long as nobody else says anything else. Leonard will do the discussion next week. I'll send out the Google Doc, and we're good.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Sounds great.
Alexis,
Thank
can you
you.
hold for a second?
Bye-bye.
Oh.
Huh?
Alexis, can you hold for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So
Okay. Bye.
you were very prepared. I want to be as good as you.